What's up, guys? We're going to Montreal, Quebec, Canada for the UFC 315 card headlined by Belal Muhammad versus Jack Della Maddalena. But Shevchenko wasn't able to take the fight due to an injury, so then Jack stepped in. Some people like the Shevchenko matchup more, some people like this matchup more. But it should be an interesting fight, and I think it's by far the best fight on the entire card. No other fight on this card stacks up to the main event. But there is two title fights. There's also Valentina Shevchenko defending her title against Manon Fiorot, the matchup that needs to happen for the flyweight division. And I think after that kind of falls off. I mean, Grasso versus Natalia Silva is a good fight. Yoel Alvarez pulled out with a hand injury, and there's reports that he might go up to welterweight instead. And the card took a big hit from that because Yoel Alvarez versus Benoit Saint-Denis was a great fight. But BSD does have a replacement opponent. Prepolec is making his return to the UFC. He's on a 3-fight win streak. Originally in the UFC, he was 0-2. Went to revamp himself. Knockout artist. Should be a fun fight. But it's not at the same level as Alvarez, you know. Aldo's on the card versus Aiemann Zahabi. So it's almost like another Mario Batista situation where they're trying to build the next contenders off of the legend. So the card is good, but for $80, it's probably like a 3 or 4 out of 10, to be honest. And as a total of 12 fights on the card is going to be at the usual time slot. And I think the prospect of the night, I think it's Aiemann. He does have a tough fight. He's the first fight starting the early prelims, and he had a notable performance against Umar Nurmagomedov for his UFC debut. He dropped him in the first round, which is something no other fighter has been able to do. And Umar is one of the best in the world. So a debut like that for Beksat, having any success against someone on Umar's caliber is going to get fans to start paying attention to his rise in the UFC. And he's very explosive, knockout artist, going to have some fun performances in that bantamweight division. The fighter of the night is, of course, Belal Muhammad. He's the champion. He's trying to build himself a legacy here, and he does have a very good opponent in front of him. The stake of the night, honestly, it can go between the two guys who are headlining the early prelims, Marc-Andre Barriault or Bruno Silva, but I'll go with Silva, as he's on a 4-loss streak, 1-6 in his last 7 fights. If he loses this one, he's probably going to be cut from the UFC. 5-fight loss streak. And it's sad because he was a very good prospect. He's very talented. He had a lot of potential until he fought Alex Pereira, which seemed to have changed him as a fighter. He has never recovered after that. And it wasn't even a knockout loss. It was a lot of damage from Alex, and he was able to withstand it for the fight, but then never was the same afterward. But the banger of the night, the most explosive, fun fight on the card, I will say is Benoit Saint-Denis versus Prepolec. Both these guys are finishers, and it should be a good fight altogether. There's not a whole lot of fights to pick for a banger, to be honest, but that is probably the best one. The sleeper of the night, the fight that is most slept on the entire card, is probably Daniel Santos versus Li Jingyang. That's going to be an explosive fight, very fun. It's a second fight on the early prelims, but should be a good one. And then the fight of the night, the overall best fight on the entire card by far, not even close, is Belal Muhammad versus Jack Della Maddalena. None of the other fights are close, man. But let's start with the first fight, Brad Katona versus Beksat Almakhan. I'm going to go with Almakhan. It's going to be tough for Katona to be perfect for 15 minutes against him. Beksat has crazy knockout power, commits to his shots beyond what is the norm for a bantamweight. It almost looks like he's going to fall over by throwing some of his punches, but does keep his balance a lot of times. And he twirls that right hand like he's pitching a fastball and can knock out anybody. I mean, he just grazed Umar with the right hand and dropped him. His highlight reel of knockouts is pure chaos. It's insane. The way he knocks these guys out, like he floors them out cold with a head kick, with a right hand, uppercuts and overhands. And I just don't see Katona getting away from those shots for 15 minutes. Beksat's also a decent wrestler. Not on the level of Umar, but I think he should definitely be able to defend some of the takedowns from Katona because Katona's well-rounded. He has good fundamentals overall, from striking to wrestling, but he does get hit. And very often throughout his fights, he doesn't have the greatest defense. He has good counterpunches. He's very good with his aggressive mix-ups of boxing and wrestling. So he'll throw up a combination up top and then shoot a double leg under. But I just think at some point, Beksat is going to time him, land an uppercut or an overhand and knock him out while defending some of the takedowns. So I'm going to go with Beksat Almakhan by a second round knockout. And then we go Daniel Santos versus Li Jingyang. I'm definitely going Santos in this one. You can tell he trains with Charles Oliveira just by watching his fights. He has like the same stance, very aggressive. He has the blonde hair, which is really cool, and then throws down with his opponent, and Lee just doesn't move his head. Shown his last fight against Haider Emil, and he cannot fight Daniel Santos like that. Santos will walk him down, bang it out, and knock him out. Lee has decent footwork. He's good linearly, moving in and out, but the lack of head movement with the pressure of Santos is going to get a good win for Daniel Santos, so I'm going with him by a 3rd round TKO after accumulation of damage throughout the 3 rounds. And then we go to Marc-Andre Barriault versus Bruno Silva. Both guys are kind of washed. Not the best fight. Barriault, I would say, is more well-rounded and he's overall more skilled, but he has absolutely no chin. When this guy gets hit, man, he doesn't move. And Silva still hits hard. He looks slower and he's not as aggressive with his striking. Barriault could mix in the takedowns and throw off Silva's rhythm, but both these guys fight relatively slow, and Silva has the knockout power. Neither guy are like that much more technical than the other. I would say Barrios' wrestling is probably the biggest difference, but I don't think it's enough for him to win the fight overall. So I'm going to go with Bruno Silva by a second round knockout. And then we go to the prelims, and we start with another city kickboxing prospect. That is Navajo Sterling, and he's fighting Ivan Urslan. Definitely have to go with Sterling. He's the much better striker. He has way better footwork, better timing on his shots. He has a big reach advantage. And the thing is, Urslan also likes to fight at this patient, slower pace, which is going to be very tough to beat Sterling like that because Sterling's great at that pace. You saw that in his fight with Tuco Tokos, just in total control the entire fight. Now, Urslan's going to look for the big right hand. He has decent boxing. He keeps his hands up. He has a decent jab, defensive footwork, moving away from punches, but he did get dropped by Ian Cutelaba, right straight through the guard. And he also did get knocked out by the Polish tank, Rafał Harati. Moving forward, ran into a counter punch, which can also happen when you fight Sterling. Too much variety in the stand-up, the reach advantage, the counter strikes, the control of the slow pace. It's going to be a tough fight for Ivan Urslan, I think. So I'm going to go with Navajo Sterling by a third round TKO after a surgical performance. I think with Modestas Bukauskas versus Ian Cutelaba. So both guys are on a 2-fight win streak. Bukauskas has 2 finishes. He submitted Marcin Praknio and knocked out Rafael Cerqueira. Ian Cutelaba had a split decision win against Ivan Urslan, and he submitted Ibo Aslan in the first round. Very similar names for opponents. Ibo Aslan, Ivan Urslan. But Cutelaba's looking good now, man. He's making somewhat of a resurgence. He's mixing up his takedowns. He's using his grappling a lot more, not just brawling with his opponent, which is also a very good switch in his style when he's going up against Bukauskas, because Bukauskas is a decent striker, a switch stance striker who has good kicks, decent counterboxing, does drop his hands sometimes, which can be a problem if Cutelaba's throwing those hooks. Bukauskas did get knocked out like that when he fought Vitor Petrino. Ran right into that left hook, dropped his right hand just enough for the punch to connect, and Cutelaba, he's not precise, or he's not a sniper targeting his punches with precision, but he does throw wild, and with Fran's gloves, those shots can land around the guard and knock Bukauskas out, but he should overall outstrike Cutelaba unless the takedowns from Cutelaba gives him success in the striking against Bukauskas. I do think Bukauskas is overall the better striker. He's a much better grappler, I think, than Ibo Aslan, or at least what Ibo Aslan showed when he fought Cutelaba. He didn't do anything to stop Cutelaba from transitioning through positions, where Bukauskas will. You saw that when he fought Vitor Petrino in the first round. He did a very good job of keeping the fight in his guard. And Vitor Petrino is decent on the ground, so there is a defensive guard game for Bukauskas if he gets taken to the ground. The only thing is, he just cannot get hit by some of those overhands and hooks. He needs to keep his hands up. Stick behind the fundamentals, throw the jab, don't get too crazy, and work off of the distance management, because Cutelaba has none of that. So I'm going with Modestas Bukauskas by a decision win. This is a very well match-made fight. And then we go to Jessica Andrade versus Jasmine Jasudavicius. I'm sorry, it's so hard to pronounce that last name. Jasudavicius. But I'm going with Jasmine. I think Andrade's prime is way behind her at this point. She's coming off a loss to Natalia Silva. Before that, beat Marina Rodriguez and Mackenzie Dern. Whereas Jasmine is on a 4-fight win streak against Priscilla Cachoeira, Fatime Klein, Irene Lipske da Silva, and Mayra Bueno Silva. She has the distance management in the stand-up. She's good on the ground, very well-rounded. Jessica Andrade is kind of the same fighter. She has a strength, cardio, chin, power, okay on the ground technically, but I think at this stage of MMA, it's going to be tougher to beat someone like Jasmine like that. A fighter who's honed in on the fundamentals in the striking, wrestling, and grappling. She has the reach, she has the higher fight IQ, she has the better distance management, she has the better footwork. She's not going to be flailing for punches like Mackenzie Dern and have the lack of takedown defense like Marina Rodriguez. And I do think she should put on, and I think this should be one of her better performances of her career. And she's fighting at home too. So there's that hometown advantage for her. She seems to perform there very well. There's some fighters that the hometown stuff gets into their head and they don't perform as well, but for her, it's the opposite. It looks like she strengthens and does better in front of her crowd. So I'm going Jasmine by decision. I think she outstrikes Andrade from range, moves away from the haymakers, defends the takedowns even if she gets pushed up against the fence. It kind of just rinse and repeats as a matador versus the bull that is Andrade. And then we go to the headliner of the prelims, Mike Malott versus Charles Radke. And Mike Malott is also from Canada. He was a lot more promising when he bursted onto the scene. 2 submission wins in the UFC until he lost to Neil Magny. And he was destroying Neil Magny in the first round, but gassed out after a single round. Did come back with a win over Trevin Giles. Not the greatest performance, but a good win, I guess. And he's a well-rounded fighter. More of a grappler. Charles Radke is more of a striker. He has good boxing, good body shots, counter punches, much better fundamentals in the stand-up. But we don't know how good Radke's takedown defense is because only one fighter in the UFC has shot takedowns on him, and that was Blood Diamond. Yeah, Blood Diamond, the kickboxer, was the only guy who shot takedowns, and all 3 of them were defended. So he's going from like 0 to 100 in terms of testing his takedown defense from Blood Diamond to Mike Malott. I think the fight can be competitive because Racky's striking is actually good, but the well-roundedness of Malott might get him the win here. If the fight goes to the ground, there might be a huge disparity between the two fighters there, whereas in the striking, I think Malott can hold his own until he gasses out, so he's gonna put an exclamation point on those first 2 rounds if he can, because that third round's gonna be dicey if it goes that far. Racky's not gonna gas out the way Malott will. If Malott shows his fatigue, Racky might go for the kill right there and finish him. He has that killer instinct. Very powerful puncher. So it can be a close fight. I'm going with Mike Malott. But man, I can see Racky knocking him out in the third round. So I can see how both fighters win. I think Malott has the better chance of winning, but Racky can finish him in the third. And then we go to the main card. Benoit Saint-Denis versus Kyle Prepolec. Kyle also from Canada, so 2 southpaw fighters, both powerful and also relatively slow. They're both like the same speed, but BSD is more well-rounded, where Prepolec I think is a better striker, or at least more technical. He has good counter punches, he has good footwork to move on angles, which combines with his counter punching ability. They both have knockout power, both good left kicks. Prepolec likes to go high with those, whereas BSD likes to go to the body. But with the fact that they're both now in the same stance, they both usually fight orthodox fighters, the left kicks of each other are going to be more towards the leg and head, which I think is going to favor Prepolec, but BSD has the grappling. That's where he's at his best. I don't think he wants to stand too much with Prepolec because the guy is a decent enough striker. Like there was a knockout he had a few years ago. He knocked the guy out, ending a combination with the lead right high kick with almost no telegraph. For BSD's best chances of winning, he needs to take the fight to the ground. So I'm going BSD by a second round submission. Respect to Kyle Prepolec for taking the fight on short notice, but I think BSD's too high of a level for him. If BSD decides to keep it standing, then Prepolec can win, but if he shoots takedowns, takes the fight to the ground, I think BSD gets the win. So second round submission, BSD. And then we go to Alexa Grasso versus Natalia Silva. This is a very interesting fight because both fighters are strikers for the most part. Grasso's more of a boxer, Silva's more of a taekwondo fighter. Grasso plods, she just moves forward, tries to line up her punches, go with the 1-2, jab straight down the center, very precise with that shot, both from orthodox and southpaw, but Silva, who also will switch stances, moves all over around the octagon, like constant movement, and extremely good counter punches, very good head movement, some of the best footwork in the entire weight class. Maybe the best footwork, honestly, now that I'm thinking about it. Good side kicks to the body, a very good jab, but does drop it. She's very confident in her head movement, so in the flyweight division, it's hard to get knocked out with one punch. Even if Grasso does land that big shot, I don't think it will knock Silva out. It's not super likely that she knocks her out with one punch, right? In the women's flyweight division. I think if Grasso doesn't cut off the cage, she loses. That's where this fight lies for her. Can she cut off the cage? If she cuts off the cage, it allows her to line her punches up better and take advantage of Natalia Silva's lack of fundamentals in her boxing. She's a lot flashier with her punches and relies a lot more on her taekwondo and kickboxing. But at the same time, Grasso's gonna have to get by a lot of strikes to get into that range to land her punches. And it's gonna depend on which stance both fighters take. I would think Grasso wants to be in the opposite stance, but then so does Silva, right? Grasso wants to line up her power straight in the open stance, where Silva will do the same thing, but also she has her kicks. Grasso might shoot takedowns, Silva usually doesn't. So Silva's the more well-rounded striker, but Grasso has the grappling to go with her striking. Silva doesn't really shoot takedowns. Defensively, I think Silva has enough to get away from some of the takedowns or even stand back up without getting submitted. And I think because Grasso doesn't usually cut off the cage that well, there's moments where she does, but she also lets fighters get away from the fence. I think Silva's going to win by a very close decision throughout those 3 rounds. Just sticking and moving the entire time, being the faster fighter with just better footwork. That is one of the better fights on the card. And then we go to Jose Aldo versus Aiemann Zahabi. So Jose Aldo, one of the greatest fighters of all time, going up against yet another rising contender that the UFC is trying to build off of the legend. They just did it with Mario Batista. I thought Aldo should have won that decision. And Zahabi's yet another well-rounded fighter who can strike, grapple, but honestly, the only way I see Zahabi winning is holding him against the fence. And at this point, Aldo has to know that's how these guys are fighting him. That's how the champion fought him. That's how Batista fought him. And Zahabi's an intelligent fighter. He probably understands that might be the best way to beat Aldo because he can't box with Aldo. It's gonna be hard for him to overall just strike with Aldo. Aldo's still very dangerous in the stand-up and has impossible takedown defense. There's no way Zahabi takes him down more than once and keeps him down. I'm going Jose Aldo. I'm going with the King of Rio to win this fight by a second round TKO. Zahabi sometimes loops his punches. There's straight shots for Jose Aldo to beat him with. Aldo has a very good jab, straight right, amazing left hook, and the mix-ups with the leg kicks can be there, as you even saw from Zahabi's fight with Javid Basharat. Those jabs from Javid were landing, and from Zahabi, there was a lot of those looping punches, man. He's not really that fast, he's not that powerful. He's a technician, like the way he timed Auri Chilang's leg kick and fired out those 2 overhands, but it could be hard to land those kind of shots on Jose Aldo, so I think Aldo defends the takedowns, learns from the fence wrestling so he can get himself off of the fence, and just outstrikes Zahabi completely. So I'm going Jose Aldo by a second round TKO. And then we go to the co-main event for the flyweight title. Valentina Shevchenko versus Manon Fiorot. Both of them are strikers. Shevchenko loves a slow pace, back and forth kickboxing matches, and Manon Fiorot will fight in that manner sometimes. So we could see that. We could see Shevchenko try to take the fight to the ground and win through that. Fiorot is a big flyweight. She's very strong. She has good takedown defense, very strong in the clinch. But the main thing is, I think Shevchenko's speed, combined with her technical ability, is going to be too much for Fiorot. There's going to be a huge speed difference. Shevchenko is more well-rounded. She could take the fight to the ground. Manon Fiorot's going to be moving forward, and Shevchenko has the counter punches made for that. And Fiorot will raise her chin up when she throws punches, shown in the Erin Blanchfield fight. Like, sometimes she'll blitz forward with her head in the air, and Shevchenko has a good right hook to counter that, or a double leg takedown to take her off her feet. But both are southpaws, so the left kicks are going to be used quite differently than how they usually use it. They both love the open stance body kick, but I do think overall Shevchenko should be able to counter Fiorot's offense, take the fight to the ground in moments, and have a speed advantage to win the fight. So I'm going with Valentina Shevchenko by decision. And then we go to the main event. This is by far the best fight on the entire card. The welterweight champion Belal Muhammad versus the number 4 contender, Jack Della Maddalena. So it can seem like a wrestler versus striker matchup because Belal obviously has the wrestling, Jack obviously has the striking. He's probably the best boxer in the entire welterweight division. He's very, very good. He's very technical with excellent reflexes, which is a huge thing going for him because Belal will strike. He'll line up his punches to mix in the takedowns. But in the split moment of those strikes, Jack can counter him. The pressure is going to be a big thing for this one. Will Belal be able to pressure Jack? Because if he does, he wins the fight. Unless Jack gets another comeback knockout win like he did against Gilbert Burns or something. Jack has to get away from the fence as much as possible for his chances to win here. Because there have been moments where he's shown good takedown defense. Now, he did get taken down a lot by Gilbert Burns and Basil Hafiz, and they weren't the craziest takedowns. I mean, they were strong, but nothing that Belal can do. And Belal's very physically strong. He has excellent cardio, and he's by far the best fence wrestler out of any of those guys. By far, not even close. If the fight stays on the fence, it's going to be tough for Jack, most likely. And also, Belal's striking cannot be slept on. He puts together combinations effectively. He has a good jab. He has improved in keeping his hands up. And he cuts off the cage very well when he's putting together those combinations so he can shoot into takedowns. Jack cannot underestimate Belal striking. Now, the one thing about Jack's takedown defense throughout 2 of those fights, against Burns and Hafiz, there is an asterisk about his takedown defense there. Against Burns, he broke his arm, and that was in the first round of their fight, so it was harder to defend a takedown when you only have one arm that's properly functional. And against Hafiz, he cut weight twice for that fight, so he wasn't at his very best for both of those, which makes his actual takedown defensive skills hard to really gauge because other than those 2 fights, he really didn't get wrestled like that. He did defend some takedowns like against Ramazan Emeev, Kevin Holland, Anže Lusa, but they pale in comparison to Burns and Belal. Emeev is probably the other best wrestler he fought, but there's just such a big difference in wrestling abilities. And he's going multiple levels above to defend takedowns against Belal now. I mean, Belal is way better than any of those guys. Now, I think Belal is still going to win the fight through his wrestling. I think he's going to take down Jack throughout the fight, control most of it, and ultimately win by decision. But I do think Jack will defend some of the takedowns, and he has a very good ability to scramble back up to his feet. He has much better scrambles than he does takedown defense. He was able to scramble out of positions with Gilbert Burns, who's very good on the ground. He even escaped a Dagestani handcuff right before the finishing sequence against Burns. And Jack uses that underhook very well, which Leon also used against Belal to separate away from him once they got to the fence. So the underhook could be a big tool for Jack to defend some of Belal's takedowns. And Belal cannot underestimate Jack there. So where Jack cannot underestimate Belal striking, Belal cannot underestimate Jack's grappling. Because if he does, Jack will get back up to his feet. And he takes advantage of those openings to knock his opponent out at any moment. I do think Jack's takedown defense is somewhat underrated, but I still don't think it's on the level to defend Belal's wrestling for 5 rounds. It's a dangerous fight for Belal, but I do think his wrestling should win him the fight here. And Belal is a minus 200 favorite against the plus 160. That makes sense. I agree with that. Valentina Shevchenko is the underdog against Manon Fiorot. Okay, well, there is your underdog. That's actually kind of surprising. I thought the lines would be reversed. So Manon Fiorot's a minus 145-ish against the plus 120 Shevchenko. I thought Shevchenko would probably be like a minus 145 against the plus 120 Fiorot. Interesting. Jose Aldo is a minus 225 favorite against the plus 185 Aiemann Zahabi. That's interesting. I would put Jose Aldo on a parlay, not bet on him by himself. Natalia Silva is a pretty big favorite. Minus 225 against the plus 175 Alexa Grasso. I don't agree with that. I think that's a close fight. I wouldn't bet on that fight. Benoit Saint-Denis is a minus 1100 against the plus 700 Kyle Prepolec. Well, okay then. Let's bet on Kyle Prepolec. Like, what? Minus 1100? I think BSD wins, but plus 700 For a knockout artist, BSD has been very overhyped throughout his career. That's very interesting. Mike Malott is a minus 200 against a plus 155 Charles Radke. Interesting. I think Malott should win, but I wouldn't bet on that fight, especially as a 200 favorite. Jasmine's a minus 295 favorite against a plus 220 Jessica Andrade. I agree, but I'll only bet Jasmine on a parlay. Ian Cutelaba and Modestas Bukauskas is pretty much a pick'em. So the matchmakers did a very good job with this fight, but I do think Bukauskas should win. There's some interesting bets to have on Bukauskas for that fight. But again, Cutelaba could knock him out. Very close fight. Navajo Sterling is a minus 300 against a plus 210, 225 Ivan Urslan. I agree with that. That's a good parlay. Marc-Andre Barrios is a minus 150 favorite against a plus 125 Bruno Silva. Very interesting. I like Silva as an underdog, and it should be a very close fight. Daniel Santos and Li Jiang is a pick'em, and I definitely think Santos wins. Beksa Almakhan is a minus 175 favorite against a plus 140-ish Bracketona. I agree with that as well. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys did, make sure to give the video a like, and I'll see you guys in the next video, which is probably going to be the podcast on either Wednesday or Thursday. So see you guys then.